You are 40,000 years ago. You are moving fast over broken ground, and your foot goes into a gap between two rocks. There is a sound you feel more than hear. Your lower leg is now bent in a place it does not bend. There is no hospital, no plaster cast, no x-ray, no painkiller, no surgery, and no ambulance because there is no road and no vehicle and nobody to call. There is just you, on the ground, and whoever happens to be with you. So what actually happens next? Do you die? Let me deal with a famous story first because you may have heard it and it is worth being straight about. The story goes that the anthropologist Margaret Mead was asked what the first sign of civilization was, and she said a healed human thigh bone. Because in the animal world, a broken leg means death, so a healed one proves somebody looked after you. It is a beautiful line. It is also almost certainly not something she said. Nobody has been able to find it in her writing or in a recorded talk, and it only appears decades later, so treat the quote as folklore. Which is a shame, except for one thing. The actual evidence says something very close to it, and the actual evidence is much more interesting. Go and look at Neanderthal skeletons, and you find a striking amount of serious injury. Broken arms, broken ribs, fractured skulls, damaged hips. That is not surprising, given they hunted enormous animals at close range. What is surprising is how much of it is healed. A broken bone that heals leaves a permanent record. New bone forms around the break in a visible thickened collar, and the surface remodels. If somebody dies immediately, you see a clean fracture with sharp edges. If they lived, you see the repair. And the repair is everywhere. That means these were not injuries people simply died from. These were injuries people lived through, sometimes for years, in a body that no longer worked properly. Now think about what living through it requires. A person with a badly broken leg cannot walk, cannot run, cannot climb, and cannot carry anything. For weeks, in a group that survives by moving to where the food is. Somebody has to bring that person food. Somebody has to bring them water. Somebody has to accept that the group either waits or carries them. That is not sentiment. That is a measurable cost paid by hungry people for someone who is producing nothing. And they paid it repeatedly for hundreds of thousands of years. There are cases that go much further than a broken leg. At a site in southern Italy called Oromito, a young person with a severe form of dwarfism, whose arms were far too short for the work of that world, lived to around 17,000 years ago and to adolescence. In Florida, at a waterlogged site called Windover, remains from around 7,000 years ago include a child with a severe spinal condition who survived to about 15. None of those people were self-sufficient. All of them were kept alive. So the caring is real. What about the actual medicine? The first problem is alignment. A broken bone will heal whether you help it or not, but it heals in whatever position it is left in. If the two ends are offset, they fuse offset, and the limb ends up shorter, twisted, or bent for the rest of your life. You can see exactly this in ancient skeletons. Plenty of healed fractures are healed badly, but not all of them. Some are set remarkably well, straight and true, which is hard to explain without somebody deliberately pulling the limb back into line and holding it there. Holding it there is the second problem, and there is a straightforward answer. Bark, stiff hide, reeds, ickies, reeds, sticks, and mud. All of it available, all of it rots, so we almost never find it from the deep past. We do find it once societies start burying people with their equipment. Splints made of bark and padded with linen have been recovered from ancient Egyptian sites. And Egyptian medical texts describe how to handle fractures in detail, including which ones you should not touch. The third problem is the one that actually kills you, and it is not the bone. If the skin is broken, an open fracture, bacteria are now inside a bone. With no antibiotics, that becomes a bone infection, and a bone infection is slow, and it wins. You can see it in the archaeological record as a distinctive damaged, pitted texture on the bone surface. A closed break with the skin intact, you can genuinely survive with rest and time. An open one is a different category of problem entirely. The fourth is pain, and here they had less than nothing. No anesthesia. The best available options were plants, and some of them do work. Willow bark contains salicin, which the body converts into the compound behind aspirin. That is real pharmacology, and it takes the edge off. It does not get you through having a femur pulled straight, so put the whole thing together. You break your leg 40,000 years ago. The break is closed, so you are not automatically doomed. Somebody straightens it, badly or well, and binds it with bark and hide. You lie still for 6 to 12 weeks while the bone knits, which is the same 6 to 12 weeks it would take today, because that part has not changed at all. The difference is that today you would be handed crutches and a sick note, and back then you were handed the group's food every day by people who could have walked away. The break is not what decides it. Bone repairs itself. It has been repairing itself for hundreds of millions of years. What decides it is whether anyone stays.